They love the emotional safety that you provide for them. You accept them with their flaws. You don't judge. You encourage them. But they don't provide emotional safety in return. You have to try and imagine, you have to wrap your head around this. Some people see you as an object. This is why they struggle so much when you have a different thought to them, a different emotion. You have an emotional reaction that they don't like. They yell at you, and instead of just absorbing it, you say, "Hey, I don't like being yelled at." Because when you tolerate that kind of love, you are picking up a quarter of a dirty Dagwood dog off the ground, brushing the sand off, eating it, and then telling yourself that you've just had a nourishing, fulfilling meal. Hello, it's me, your internet auntie. When I was about 12 years old, I remember going to a sports carnival, and I used to run the 400-meter sprint. And for some reason, I was sent to this sports carnival without any lunch and without any money for the tuck shop. So you imagine a day of athletics, you're absolutely exhausted, you've used up all your energy. I was starving. I was so hungry that I started snooping around looking for food that other kids had thrown away. And I remember walking past this bin, and lying there on the ground in the sand was a quarter of a Dagwood dog, which I think in America you call a corn dog, lying there uneaten in the sand. I waited till no one was looking. I picked it up, dusted the sand off, and I ate it. And at the time, I thought it was so delicious. Yucky. And this is what happens in emotionally abusive and neglectful relationships. You might not have any bruises, and yet you know something isn't right. You have to earn their love. You perform for their approval. You act out your role as the obedient daughter, the loving friend, the forgiving husband. You act out your role so perfectly, treading on eggshells to avoid abandonment. And then you're so grateful for every breadcrumb of affection that falls from the table. And you don't want to accuse them of being neglectful or abusive because you love them. You don't want to see them in that light. You're wearing your rose tinted glasses. You're choosing to only see the good times. Yes. Yeah, I love you. I know. So you have this narrative built up in your head where they're just misunderstood and you're too sensitive and your needs aren't really that important anyway. So it's worth taking a moment to make a distinction here. Keeping someone at arm's length because they're hurting you isn't the same as breadcrumbing them. That's just having boundaries. But giving someone the cold shoulder because they won't submit to your demands, that is controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. So let's have the courage to call a spade a spade. Be honest with yourself about what is actually happening. If you believe in reincarnation or something, I don't agree, but knock yourself out. Whatever feels right to you, I guess. But why would you want to waste the only life you definitely have, which is this one right now? Why would you waste that on people who can't be bothered to consistently show you even the most basic, scraping the bottom of the barrel, love and respect? I wouldn't wish that kind of love on my worst enemy. I really wouldn't. May that kind of love never find any of us ever again. Because when you tolerate that kind of love, you are picking up a quarter of a dirty Dagwood dog off the ground, brushing the sand off, eating it, and then telling yourself that you've just had a nourishing, fulfilling meal. So, is it emotional neglect or just incompatibility? I think something that's worth clarifying here is that different people certainly have different needs for a certain amount of contact. Some people, when you talk to them about their dating life or something, and they'll say, They can't stand it when someone takes more than half an hour to reply to a text. Whereas someone else, you hear about them, they've been married 10 years and they're quite happy, and they might text each other twice a day or something. You know what I mean? That's not necessarily neglect. So it doesn't mean that they're manipulating you, and it doesn't mean that your need for connection is wrong. It might just be that you're not made for each other. You're just not aligned in that sense. So let them go and move on. You can't fit a square peg into a round hole without damaging both in the process. These dynamics become abusive when the other person is keeping you confused with their inconsistency. If someone is consistently unavailable, unattentive, and uninterested, they're just not that into you. And we're not entitled to anyone's time, attention, or love. When someone is swooping in, smothering you with love, praise, and affection when you're doing what they want, but if the moment you set a boundary, such as, hey, I really don't feel safe when you yell at me, when you raise your voice to me, and then they blow up and act like they're being bullied or like you're just too sensitive, and then they turn around and start giving you the cold shoulder as punishment, that's abuse. They want you crawling on your hands and knees, apologizing for wanting to be treated with basic respect so that they can then treat you in whatever way they see fit. Another telltale sign of emotional abuse and emotional starvation is that when you're finally so exhausted from the roller coaster, the highs and the lows. I know we always cling to the highs and we think, oh, that's who they really are. The lows, oh, the lows are just a low, but that's who they really are. At the moment you step off the roller coaster and you decide, you know what, maybe I don't like roller coasters that much. Maybe I don't like all this instability. The moment you start to mentally and emotionally step back, suddenly they come rushing back in with all of the same love, praise, admiration that they showered you with in the beginning. They might even apologize at this point, and it might sound sincere because they know they're about to lose access to you. And then the cycle starts up again and again and again. How many times are you going to do it? How many times are you going to ride this roller coaster? How many times are you going to put up with being starved? They might also come back after a period of time apart and just paper over the cracks and act like nothing was ever wrong to begin with and just tell you all these great, amazing, wonderful stories about all the cool, awesome stuff that they've been doing while you've been apart. And you'll feel bad saying something to them because you don't want to interrupt their cool, amazing, fun, awesome story. But this is by design. They do this on purpose so that you'll feel guilty and you won't want to, bring down their vibe with accountability. And they'll just want to get let back into your life without ever apologizing at all, without taking responsibility for what they did. So, is this what you think of when you think about love? When you think about the love of a partner, of a sibling, of a parent? That's love, is it? That's your definition of love. That's what you want love to look like. Because if that's what you're looking for, go out there and get it. I mean, there's plenty, there's plenty of relationships like that. You don't have to look far. You do not have to look far. The reason these people often come back is to feed off your emotional energy, your empathy. They're emotional vampires. You might think that people only get used for money or for sex. I disagree. I mean, people can be used for those things, but I would say more commonly, because it's more subtle, it's harder to detect, and I think it goes on a lot more frequently than the other two. They love the emotional safety that you provide for them. You accept them with their flaws, you don't judge, you encourage them. but they don't provide emotional safety in return. That's why you feel so insecure, so anxious, and so confused all the time when they're around. But you feel reasonably okay, or at least better, when they're not around, when you're just in your own company or when you're with a friend. You might not realize how valuable your emotional energy and your emotional labor actually is, but they do. That's why they come back. You probably don't realize this because you're probably a reasonably humble person and you just don't think that encouraging someone and being accepting and being loving is really something to make a big deal about. That's just the bare minimum. That's just what you do for people. But to them, that's addictive. That's like a gold mine because they're unable to give that to themselves. They don't give that to themselves. They don't give that to other people. They just take and take and take. So being a good listener in your eyes is just a normal, nice thing to do. In their eyes, that is a resource that can be mined. And they want to keep you dysregulated, anxious, uncertain, confused, because that's a great way of controlling you and maintaining access over their resource for as long as possible. This is why they feed you breadcrumbs. This is why they feed you breadcrumbs. And you sit under the table at their feet, nibbling at the scraps that fall from the table. And you want to call that love. Yucky. Put that dirty Dagwood dog back in the bin where it belongs. Their goal with you isn't love, it's control. You are a resource, you are an object in their mind. You can't have your own thoughts, opinions, or boundaries unless they have chosen those thoughts, opinions, and boundaries for you. You're not an individual. When someone is objectifying you, we always hear that in the context of only being seen for your physical appearance. But that's not the full picture of what it means to be objectified. It literally means that this other person is just seeing you as an object, a resource that is to be used, a resource, an object that is theirs to own and control. The same way that we own a washing machine, right? You go, you buy a washing machine, um, you expect it to wash your clothes. You don't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I wonder how my washing machine feels today. Maybe it would rather go for a walk. Maybe it doesn't want to wash my clothes today. Like you don't care about your washing machine's feelings. That would be pretty concerning. I mean, we care for our washing machines. We empty the lint tray. We do these little things we need to do to keep it running, to keep it working for us, but we don't care about it. So if you can, you have to try and imagine, you have to wrap your head around this. Some people see you as an object. This is why they struggle so much when you have a different thought to them, a different emotion. You have an emotional reaction that they don't like. They yell at you, and instead of just absorbing it, you say, hey, I don't like being yelled at, or it upsets you, maybe you cry or something. That really makes them angry. It makes them agitated because it's like the washing machine is faulty. The washing machine isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to just encourage and obey, absorb all their emotional outbursts. Because you don't have your own feelings, remember? You're a washing machine. You don't have your own feelings, so you just absorb their outbursts and you encourage and you accept them and etc etc, and they'll just do the bare minimum. They'll empty the lint tray, right? They might clean every now and then. They might clean the drum. They don't care. It's a very big difference. And so these people, they might feel as though they have purchased you through moments of generosity, moments of affection, moments of encouragement. They will be encouraging sometimes, but it's like they think they can just put a few kindness coins in every now and then so that loyalty falls out, like a vending machine. Again, you're just being objectified. So, as far as they're concerned, you are an object that they own, and your only purpose is to serve their needs without having any of your own needs. So, how do you know if someone is doing this on purpose? Determining another person's intentions is impossible. You can't do it with 100% accuracy, but there are ways to gauge someone's willingness to work towards, both of you working towards, a mutually loving and respectful relationship. I mean, we all mess up. I know I have. None of us are perfect. We all do stupid things sometimes, and we all behave neglectfully occasionally. The difference is whether they take accountability in a sincere way, and it's not just this roller coaster, up and down, the same pattern over and over and over and over and over again. There never seems to be long periods of peace. So while you can never know 100% if someone is doing this on purpose, you can know your own feelings and you can know how you feel around this person. Do you ever worry how this person will react if you have something you need to talk to them about? Do you worry how they're going to react because of past experiences with them? Or do you worry how they'll react because of past experiences with someone else? See, there's a difference with that. Sometimes our feelings trip us up a little bit. Sometimes we have trauma from a past relationship and we don't want to project it onto the current relationship, the current friendship, whatever it is. But do you actually have past experiences where you try to talk to this person, you're calm, you weren't accusing, and they just blow up on you and then give you the cold shoulder? So, do you feel calm and secure after spending time with this person? Or do you feel a mixture of excitement and confusion? That's a red flag. The excitement sometimes disguises the confusion. And excitement, generally speaking, isn't actually a good thing. You don't want butterflies in your stomach. You almost want a feeling of like, oh my gosh, I could just nap right now. I could just nap around this person. Because your nervous system is telling you, we are safe to rest here. We're safe to relax. We don't need to be on high alert with this person. So listen to your nervous system. A real meal can feel wrong when you're used to starvation. I went without meals sometimes as a kid, fairly often, um, but I never experienced literal brink of starvation. But you might have heard stories of people who've literally come back from the brink of starvation, and it's not actually safe to start flooding them with nourishing meals. They can get something called refeeding syndrome, where their body becomes overwhelmed with all this really good quality nutrition that they're just not used to. And in the same way, our nervous system can become overwhelmed when we're used to starvation cycles, when we're used to the roller coaster, when we're used to neglect. A genuinely loving person can feel kind of weird and uncomfortable, and you don't know why. And this is why it's so important to just take your time getting to know people. Really take your time. You don't know someone in the first month. Doesn't matter how well you get along. You don't know them in 3 months. It's an ongoing process of getting to know them. So when we see these parallels between literal physical starvation and emotional starvation, when you're used to the roller coaster, real love can feel kind of boring or even a bit bland by comparison. Real love can also trigger fear, not because there's anything wrong, but just because it's unfamiliar. Our nervous systems, past a certain age, our nervous systems don't really like anything that's unfamiliar, even if it's good for us. So our little mammalian brains kind of freak out when we experience something that we're not used to. So we go through something called a critical socialization period when we're younger. And the type of care or lack thereof that we receive when we're really young is generally the model that we have set up in our minds for what love looks like. And this is what we then seek out in friendships, in work environments, and in romantic relationships in the future. So if we experience neglect and abandonment, we unconsciously seek out this pattern in our adult lives. Even though it's painful, at least it's familiar. And our nervous system just wants to protect us from anything that's unfamiliar because it might be unsafe. That's where you get the saying, better the devil you know. So, without getting into the weeds of developmental psychology, you will tend to repeat these patterns later in life if that's what you experienced when you're younger. But the good news is you can retrain your nervous system. You're not stuck with this for the rest of your life. You can consciously rewire your brain. When I was 22, I just on a whim, I picked up this book at a grocery store in Queensland, and it's called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. And this man will never know, but he literally saved my life. This book, it's not about developmental psychology, it's not about relationships and emotional abuse or anything like that. But it is just about how the nervous system can be rewired through practice, through mindful practice. And this was during a time in my life when I had chronic existential depression. I had really severe panic attacks. I mean, those of you who've ever had panic attacks, you know they normally last about 20 minutes and then they sort of fade out. These went on for 4 or 5 hours at a time. I was actually hospitalized a few times for them. I thought I was having a heart attack. And it was a very, very difficult time. Very, very painful time for me. And I was just so desperate to look for answers of, like, is it possible to unlearn all the shittiness that I learned in childhood? Is it possible? Honestly, the only thing that kept me going, I mean, I was just living in a constant state of thinking about, not being here anymore. The only thing that kept me going was thinking, I know there are other people out me, out. There are other people out me. There are other people out there like me who've experienced similar things and are going through this same struggle. And I thought, I know I'm not alone with this, even though I felt alone. I thought, I know I'm not actually alone with this. And if I can just treat myself like a guinea pig and just try different things and see if anything will work, find out what works, find out what doesn't work. I thought maybe one day I can then share those experiences, and it will help someone else to be able to recover from these things, but maybe not take quite such a long time. I would say it took me about 15 years. I just thought if I could do that, like at the very least, that would turn my pain into some kind of purpose. Even though I don't believe everything happens for a reason, I don't. But you can give it meaning. You can turn it into something positive. So that's what I'm attempting to do with this channel. So, how can we get comfortable having a proper meal when starving feels so familiar? When unpredictable, unsafe relationships feel normal, we have to be willing to let go of our internal beliefs and the identities, our identities that we have about ourselves. We have to be willing to let go of the identities that allow these types of relationships to continue to enter our lives. You might identify as a healer, a rescuer, a provider, always trying to fix people who are flinging shit at you. We have to let go of the internal story of why do people treat me this way? And start to ask, why am I begging for breadcrumbs? Because in accepting breadcrumbs from someone else, you're also giving yourself breadcrumbs. And when you give yourself breadcrumbs, you're more willing to accept breadcrumbs from other people. It's a vicious cycle. When you neglect your own needs, you're more willing to accept neglect from other people. When you violate your own boundaries, you're more willing to allow other people to violate your boundaries as well. When you really start caring for yourself, running a hot bath, making time for your hobbies, going for a walk in the park with your phone on silent, saying no sometimes to a favor, just saying, no, sorry, I can't do that just now. Spending time with people who make you laugh, and just generally learning to walk your own path without needing constant approval for every little decision from other people. You start to feel this internal peace because you're listening to your internal compass. And when you've experienced that kind of peace and love within yourself, your appetite for it grows. I heard this cool saying on a podcast once a friend was listening to, and they said, the hunger grows with the eating. I thought that was such a cool way of putting it. So take yourself on dates. I do that all the time. I go up to the pub, I get myself a nice little glass of wine, I have a meal, I take a book, I read the book, I bring Sky. Hey, Sky. He's not paying attention. That's fine. He's doing his own thing. Oh, hello. Hey, good boy. Yeah. I take Sky, take myself on a little date. Even though I have a boyfriend, I still take myself on dates. And it's lovely. I have a great time. I speak kindly to myself. Even when I fuck something up, I'm like, oh, that has made things worse. Okay, what's a plan? How are we going to do this better in the future? And I make a little plan and I write it down and I have little baby steps every day that to work towards it. You become so in love with your own life that you're not going to tolerate any nonsense from anyone else. You're not going to tolerate starvation, breadcrumbs, the cold shoulder, hot and cold treatment. You're going to tolerate it. Eventually, you're not going to accept anyone into your life unless they bring more peace and joy than what you already have. But that baseline of peace and joy has to come from yourself. You're not going to get it looking for it in other people. You have to know what it feels like within yourself first before you can recognize what that looks like in anyone else. So back to my Dagwood dog story. I know that in hindsight, I could have asked any of my teachers. I'm sure probably all of them would have immediately. I can think of one teacher in particular, my art teacher. I know he would have gone and he would have bought me lunch. He was so sweet. But I was too scared and I felt ashamed that I didn't have lunch. I felt like I was lacking in some way, like I was deserving of not having any lunch, and all I deserved was that dirty, sand covered Dagwood dog sitting beside the bin. When your needs have been treated as inconvenient and annoying, you get this feeling that your needs are wrong and that there's something to be ashamed of. And I wrote this little line, I wrote this whole script out. Anyway, I wrote this little line I'm very proud of, okay? And so we believe that a quarter of a dirty Dagwood dog is a real meal, and that we're just ungrateful if we don't like the feeling of crunching sand between our teeth. That's all I've got. Go forth and create real nourishment. Your internet auntie has spoken. Goodbye.